I was 68 years old the night my own daughter hauled off and slapped me across the face in front of about 250 people at her wedding, all because I wouldn't hand over my $840,000 penthouse like it was a free party favor. For a second, that ballroom at the Bayshore Grand in Tampa went dead quiet. The band cut off mid-note. The mic in my hand let out this ugly screech of feedback. Every conversation froze. Glasses hung halfway in the air, and then all those phones turned toward us like a wall of little glowing eyes, every single one pointed right at my face. Kelly's handprint bloomed bright red on my right cheek. My ear was ringing. I tasted champagne, turning sour and metallic on my tongue. Somewhere near the head table, someone let out this tiny gasp that turned into an awkward little laugh, and then more nervous laughter started rolling through the room like a wave I couldn't stop. I did not cry. I just stood there. Before I tell you what happened next, I want you to do something for me. Drop a comment and tell me where in the world you're re-listening from and what time it is right now. Are you at work? Relaxing at home? Folding laundry? Stuck in traffic? Scrolling in bed when you should be asleep? I want to know who's on the other side of this story with me. And if any of this already hits a nerve, if you've ever felt used by your own family, go ahead and hit like and subscribe. You might think you know where this is going, but trust me, you don't. I was 68 years old the night back to that ballroom. I was standing under those crystal chandeliers with 250 pairs of eyes pressing down on me. My cheek burned like it was on fire, and my brain did the weirdest thing. Instead of screaming or arguing, it started replaying snapshots. I saw the penthouse on the 22nd floor that I bought after my husband died. The place everybody talked about like it was some kind of family vacation house, not my safety net for old age. I saw all those years I worked doubles at Tampa General just to qualify for that mortgage in the first place. And then my eyes landed on a woman sitting 2 tables back, smoothing her tie and watching everything with this sharp, laser-focused expression. Judge Linda Graves, family court, elder cases. I'd seen her on the local news more times than I could count. And now, here she was, staring at my daughter like Kelly had just walked straight into one of her case files. Kelly leaned into the microphone, eyes blazing, voice blasting to every corner of that room. "You're really gonna embarrass me like this, Mom, on my wedding day, after everything I've done for you, everything she'd done for me." That line almost made me laugh. If my mouth didn't taste like blood from biting the inside of my cheek. The DJ's assistant hovered near us like he wasn't too sure if he should snatch the mic or pretend none of this was happening. Bridesmaids in matching rose-colored dresses kept fussing with their hair, watching every second from the corner of their eyes. At the back, my bridge group from the condo association sat frozen, forks stuck halfway between their plates and their mouths. Every angle had a phone on it, little red recording lights blinking. This mess was getting saved forever. Kelly just kept going. Louder and shriller. "This is who raised me. Everybody. This is the woman who would rather hoard her fancy condo than help her own daughter start a family. My own mother." On my wedding day, her face was twisted into something ugly. I'd seen flashes of that look before over the years, always smoothed over with tears and apologies later. Tonight, no tears, no apologies. She wanted the whole world to see her rage. I straightened my back, carefully set the mic down on the table right next to the untouched wedding cake, the one with sugar flowers that cost more than my first car. The DJ stared at me like he was begging for permission to blast the music and erase this whole scene. I gave him a small nod, then I walked off the stage. No screaming, no dramatic speech, just my heels clicking across the polished wood floor while my only child stood there in the middle of her own reception, chest heaving, fingers still curled from the slap. The music kicked back in too loud and too fast, like somebody hit the wrong button. A few guests clapped out of pure panic. Someone yelled something about love and marriage, trying to patch the moment back together with a bad joke. Conversations unstuck themselves and slid into low, shocked whispers. I just kept walking. That was the moment something inside me didn't break. It locked into place. People like to act surprised when families blow up like this, like it all comes out of nowhere in one crazy night. As if years of tiny compromises and ignored red flags don't stack up into anything real. As if "but she's your daughter" is some kind of magic shield against abuse. It's not. It has never worked that way. My name is Margaret Langley. I spent 40 years as a nurse, mostly at the same hospital. I married my high school sweetheart Frank when I was 19. We had one daughter, Kelly. We lived in a plain little ranch house out in Brandon, drove used cars, and clipped coupons like they were printed in gold, because when money's tight and the future's shaky, you do what you have to do. When Frank died of a stroke 12 years ago, the life insurance and my retirement savings were all I had left. A coworker told me not to let that money just sit there and rot under inflation. Do something smart with it, Margie. Put it in something solid, she said. That's how I ended up standing in a bare concrete box on the 22nd floor of a new tower overlooking Tampa Bay, listening to some young realtor with perfect teeth promise me that in 10 years my place would be worth a fortune. It's listed at $410 now, she said, waving at the open windows where the bay stretched out like a postcard. Give it some time, and this'll be an $800,000 view, easy. And you know what? She was right. I bought that penthouse with my hands still smelling like hospital soap. I kept working until 65 to pay it off. I painted the walls myself, piece by piece, overtime shift by overtime shift. I turned that empty shell into a home. It was the first thing in my life that was truly mine. And Kelly knew it. She'd come over, toss her purse on my couch, turn in a slow circle like she was already mentally rearranging the furniture. Back then she made little jokes. Mom, this place is way too big for you. You should let me and Travis live here when we have kids. You can grab a cute little condo somewhere with your knitting and book club. She always said it with a laugh, so I laughed too. But every time, that idea dug a little deeper, like a seed she thought I wouldn't notice. Looking back now, that was my first warning. And like a lot of mothers, I chose not to see it. Out in the hallway of the Bayshore Grand, my cheeks still on fire, I reached into my purse for a tissue and felt the little envelope with my speech in it. I'd written about Kelly's first steps, about how proud her father would have been, about love and new beginnings. None of it got read. My legs started to shake, so I leaned against a marble column and focused on my breathing, while the music and fake laughter spilled out from behind those heavy doors. Ms. Langley. I looked up. Judge Linda Graves was standing a few feet away, clutch purse in one hand, heels shining on the polished floor. Her face was calm, but her eyes were sharp in that way you only get from seeing too much ugliness for too many years. I hope you don't mind me speaking to you, she said softly. I'm Linda. We've never met, but I know your old boss at the hospital. Of course she did. Tampa's a small town if you stay long enough. I'm fine, I heard myself say automatically. That old reflex hurt more than my cheek. Her gaze flicked to the bright red mark on my face. No, she said gently. You're not. What she didn't know, standing there in that hallway with her business card already in her hand, was how much that penthouse had cost me in ways that had nothing to do with dollars. Let's rewind about 15 years before that wedding night, back when everything still looked fine on paper. Kelly was 22, fresh out of college, and full of ideas. She'd talk about moving to Miami or maybe New York, working in marketing, building a brand. She had that fire, that restless drive to be seen, and I wanted her to fly. I really did. But flying takes money, and she didn't exactly land softly. Within a year, she'd blown through her savings chasing networking events that were basically rooftop parties. When rent came due, she called me crying. Mom, I just need a few months to catch up. I swear I'll pay you back. Of course, I wired her the money. What mother wouldn't? Then came the few months that turned into a year. Then 2. See, it's funny how giving someone everything they ask for doesn't buy gratitude. It just raises the price of the next favor. Kelly eventually met Travis, smooth talker, nice suits, big smile, but the kind of guy who treated every room like a mirror. Everything was always about how he looked in it. My gut told me to stay cautious, but she loved him, so I bit my tongue. When they got engaged, she wanted to have the wedding at a place that represents our future. That's what she said. Then she gave me this pointed little smile and added, you know, something like your penthouse. I should have seen it right there, the setup. The next few months, she called daily about guest lists, decorations, vendors, and investment ideas. Every other conversation somehow looped back to the penthouse. Mom, you won't even need that big place once I have kids. Wouldn't you rather live near your bridge club, or maybe a cute little senior complex? It was never just talk. I later found out she'd shown pictures of my home to a realtor. She was planning to list it without even asking me. That discovery hit like ice water down my spine. It was the first time I stopped seeing her as my little girl and started seeing her as someone else entirely. When I confronted her, she didn't even deny it. She just laughed, tossed her hair, and said, Mom, chill, you're overreacting. I was just looking. That's the thing about people who cross lines, they always act like you're the one making a scene. I didn't speak to her for 2 months after that. Then, one day, she showed up at my door with flowers and a shaky smile. I'm sorry, Mom, I didn't mean it. I was just stressed about the wedding. You know I love you. And like an idiot, I believed her, because mothers do that. We forgive. We patch things up even when the cracks are deep enough to swallow us whole. So, I helped her again, paid half the caterer, covered the flowers, even let her use my event planner connection. But I made one quiet promise to myself: the penthouse stays mine, period. And that promise, that single, silent boundary, is what led us to the slap that would make headlines in my condo association newsletter for the next 3 months. When I stepped out of that ballroom, heels clacking across marble, it felt like walking off the edge of my old life. You know, that eerie silence right after a storm when everything's too still, like the world's holding its breath. That was me. I didn't cry, didn't even curse. I just stood in the parking lot of the Bayshore Grand watching valet guys jog around with keys in hand, pretending not to stare at the woman who'd just been slapped by her daughter at her own wedding. Tampa humidity was thick enough to taste. The bay lights shimmered behind me, and for a minute, I honestly thought about just driving anywhere. But you can't outrun family mess. It sticks to you. When I got home, my phone was blowing up: texts, voicemails, even Facebook messages from people I hadn't heard from in years. Are you okay? What happened? Did she really hit you? One message said, "Oh my God, it's on TikTok." That's when my stomach dropped. I didn't even have a TikTok account. But apparently, I was trending. By morning, my face read handprint, and all had been looped, remixed, captioned, and dissected by strangers. Entitled, "Bride Slaps Mom Over Money." That's what the headline said on one of those gossip pages. Hundreds of comments poured in. Some defended her, others called her a monster. But you know what hit hardest? The ones that said I must have done something to deserve it. It's wild how people will invent reasons to make someone else's pain make sense. I didn't answer calls for 2 days. I barely ate. Then, on the third morning, someone buzzed my intercom. "Mrs. Langley, it's Judge Graves." For a second, I thought she was kidding. Judges don't show up at your door. But there she was, holding a paper bag with 2 coffees and a box of lemon muffins. "I figured you might not be sleeping much," she said. I wasn't. She sat with me in my kitchen, same spot where I used to feed Kelly pancakes before school, and said, "You know, what your daughter did wasn't just rude. It was coercion, financial abuse. Technically, happens more than people think." I wanted to laugh. Financial abuse. She's my daughter, not a scam artist. The judge didn't blink. Those aren't always different categories. That line stuck with me. She explained how it starts: emotional manipulation, guilt, small favors that turn into expectations. The moment you say no, they punish you. Sometimes with words, sometimes with silence, sometimes with violence. By the time she left, my coffee was cold, but my brain was on fire. I pulled out every old text and email from Kelly that suddenly read like evidence. I remembered every time she made me feel crazy for wanting boundaries. And I realized something no mother ever wants to admit: my daughter didn't just cross a line. She'd erased it entirely. 3 days later, I got a knock on my door. It was Travis, my brand new son-in-law, or, as I started calling him in my head, the salesman. He had that fake sympathy smile glued to his face, holding a bouquet of cheap lilies. "Hey Mom, mind if I come in? Just to clear the air." He walked in before I could answer. Sat at my kitchen table like he owned the place. "Kelly's really upset," he said, shaking his head. "She feels terrible about what happened. You know how emotional weddings are." "Emotional?" I said. "She assaulted me, Travis." He gave this tight chuckle. "Come on, you know Kelly. She doesn't mean harm. She just gets intense. But look, we can make this right. She just wants to move forward." Then he pulled out a folder. Inside were property transfer forms. My penthouse. I felt the blood drain from my face. "Are you out of your mind?" I asked. He kept that salesman tone. "It's just paperwork for after, you know, when you're ready." Kelly thought maybe it'd be good to have it sorted now, so there's no confusion later. "You'll always have your space. We'll just manage it." That word "manage" lit a fuse inside me. I stood up so fast my chair screeched. "Travis, I've been managed by doctors, bosses, and bills my whole damn life. I'm not about to hand over the only thing I own to you, just so you can manage it." He blinked, startled for maybe the first time in his smooth little life. I leaned across the table, low voice. "You tell my daughter, if she wants to fix things, she can start by apologizing like a grown woman, without cameras, without paperwork." He mumbled something about regrettable misunderstandings and left, slamming the door just hard enough to make my windows rattle. For a few minutes, I stood there shaking. Then I laughed ugly, exhausted laughter. That's when I decided I wasn't going to let my own child bully me out of my home. A week later, I met with Judge Graves again. She introduced me to a lawyer who specialized in elder exploitation. Turns out, you don't have to be senile for people to treat you like an ATM. We drafted new documents, the ironclad will, property locks, power of attorney terms, all of it airtight. My penthouse became my fortress, legally speaking. And I didn't tell Kelly a damn thing. Days turned into weeks. Kelly and Travis went radio silent, except for one email. Short, cold. "Mom, I can't believe you're being like this. You're ruining everything. Don't contact us again." I read it twice, closed my laptop, and whispered, "Okay." That night, for the first time in years, I slept 8 hours straight. 3 months passed before I heard her name again. One of my old coworkers ran into Kelly at a bar in St. Pete. She looked rough, she said. Said her husband's business tanked. Something about bad loans. Guess karma finally clocked in for her shift. Another month later, I got a knock on my door again. When I opened it, Kelly stood there, makeup smeared, eyes hollow, clutching a duffel bag. "Mom," she whispered, voice cracking, "can I come in?" I didn't move for a long time. My heart wanted to hug her. My brain reminded me of the slap, the humiliation, the TikToks, but she was still my daughter. So I stepped aside. She sat at the counter, crying silently. I poured her coffee, same mug she used to steal from in college. "Travis took everything," she finally said. "He drained my accounts, maxed out my cards. He's gone." I listened. Didn't say I told you so. Didn't scold. I just let her talk. When she finished, I said, "You can stay a few nights, but you'll follow my rules. No yelling, no guilt trips, no talk about my condo deal." She nodded, eyes swollen, voice small. "Deal." And for a while, she did behave. Helped around the house, cooked breakfast, even apologized again, this time without cameras. I wanted to believe it. I really did. But one night, I woke up around 2 a.m. and found her sitting at my desk, scrolling through my financial files on my laptop. That's when I knew this wasn't a redemption arc. This was a pattern. "Kelly," I said quietly, standing in the doorway. "What are you doing?" She froze. "Nothing. I was just..." "Don't lie to me. Not again." Her shoulders sagged. "I just wanted to see if you added me to your will." There it was, plain and simple. I took a deep breath, steady and slow. "Pack your things. You're leaving in the morning." She didn't fight this time, just stared at me with this bitter look, like she still couldn't believe I wasn't the pushover she built me to be. When the door shut behind her that next morning, the air in my apartment felt lighter than it had in years. I sat down by the window, coffee in hand, watching the sunrise roll over Tampa Bay, and said out loud to no one, "That's the last time." That was 2 years ago. Kelly never came back. She sent a few emails trying to make peace, but they all ended with some version of, "I still think you owe me." So I stopped replying. Now I spend my mornings reading, walking by the water, sometimes volunteering at the hospital, again helping other women spot the same warning signs I ignored. Sometimes, I still see that video pop up online, people reacting, judging, guessing who was right or wrong. I don't correct them. They don't know the years behind that slap, but I do. And here's the truth I wish every parent could tattoo on their heart. Love doesn't mean surrender. Boundaries aren't betrayal. And sometimes, the bravest thing you can do for your child is finally stop rescuing them. I used to think silence was peaceful. After everything that happened, I learned silence can also be loud. Too loud. The kind that sits in your chest like a second heartbeat. For months after Kelly left for good, I'd wake up before sunrise, wander into my kitchen, and just listen. The hum of the refrigerator, the ticking clock above the stove, the gulls screaming outside over the bay. The sounds that used to mean home now felt like ghosts walking the halls. I'd pour my coffee, stare out across the water, and wait for something to change. It never did. At least, not right away. The calls, you'd think after all the drama, my phone would have stayed quiet. But life never plays by clean endings. A couple months in, Kelly started calling again, different number every time, like she wanted me to pick up before I realized who it was. Sometimes she'd leave voicemails. I never listened to them all the way through, but I heard enough. Mom, it's me. Please, I just need to talk. Mom, I'm in trouble. Mom, please don't hang up again. Every message was like a small bruise on my heart, but I'd been through enough bruises to know when to stop poking them. Then one night, she called while I was half asleep. Against my better judgment, I answered. She sounded sniffling, shaky. Travis filed for bankruptcy. We're drowning. Mom, I lost my job. My credit's shot. I can't even get approved for a car lease. I said nothing. She waited for me to ask how I could help. When I didn't, she said, I thought you'd at least care that I'm homeless. That hit hard. But I also knew my daughter, every word could be true, or it could be bait. And the truth was, I didn't have the strength to find out which one, so I told her calmly, Kelly, you're 37, you'll figure it out, the same way I did when I was your age. I'm done being your safety net. She went quiet for a few seconds, then hissed, you're unbelievable, and hung up. And just like that, I lost my daughter again. The therapist, Judge Graves, God bless that woman, didn't just help with lawyers. She gave me a card for a therapist who specialized in post-narcissistic recovery. I laughed when she said that. I'm not in a cult, Linda, I told her. She smiled and said, sometimes family can feel like one. So I went. Her name was Dr. Nina Campos, mid-40s, sharp eyes, silver streak in her hair that looked intentional. She had this way of sitting perfectly still when I talked, like she was tuning in to a radio frequency only I could hear. I told her everything from the slap to the silence that came after. When I finished, she said something that rattled me. Margaret, you're grieving, but not for a person you, re-grieving for the fantasy of who you thought your daughter was. I stared at her. You're saying Kelly never loved me. I'm saying she loved the version of you that kept giving. She didn't know what to do when you started saying no. That sentence felt like a punch and a hug all at once. I left her office feeling lighter but also cracked open. Over the next few weeks, I started journaling like she told me to, writing down everything I remembered, not to dwell, but to get it out of my head. I filled pages, fights, birthdays, late-night phone calls, all the small moments I'd ignored because I thought love covered everything. You'd be surprised how much truth fits between lines you once called love. The lawsuit, then came the letter. White envelope, thick paper, official seal. I almost laughed when I read it. Kelly had filed a petition for inheritance advancement basically. She wanted the court to force me to hand over part of my estate early, claiming I was mentally unfit to manage high-value assets. Let that sink in. My own kid tried to declare me incompetent so she could cash out before I was even dead. I called Linda. She was quiet for a moment, then said, Margaret, we're going to fight this, and we're going to win. The hearings dragged on for months. Kelly didn't even show up half the time. When she did, she looked thinner, tired, older than her years. Her lawyer did most of the talking, painting me like some paranoid old woman hoarding wealth from her poor, struggling child. But when it was my turn to speak, I kept it simple. I worked 40 years as a nurse. I cleaned other people's messes, held dying hands, worked every Thanksgiving for 2 decades. The only thing I've got left is that condo. And I'm not giving it to someone who's already shown me what they do with it. Even the judge, some man I'd never met, nodded. Case dismissed. Afterward, I sat in my car in the courthouse parking lot, and for the first time since that slap, I actually cried. Not from sadness, relief, the kind that leaves your whole body trembling. You know what I realized, sitting there with my face in my hands? I wasn't crying over losing her anymore. I was crying because I finally let her go. The stranger's word got around about the case. Tampa's smaller than people think. I started getting letters, actual handwritten ones from women my age, even some men. They'd seen the story online, recognized themselves in it. One woman wrote, my son drained my retirement account pretending it was for college. I thought I was the only one. Another said, my daughter turned on me after my husband died. Thank you for showing me it's okay to say no. Those letters became my new company. I kept them in a shoebox under my coffee table. When I felt weak, I'd pull one out and read it. It reminded me I wasn't crazy. That standing up for yourself even against your own blood doesn't make you heartless. It makes you free. Funny thing is, the more I healed, the more space opened up in my life for good things. I started volunteering again at the hospital. I even adopted a rescue cat, some scruffy orange thing the shelter called Tom Brady. He followed me around like a furry little bodyguard. At night, I'd sit by the window with a glass of wine, him purring on my lap, the lights of the city dancing on the bay. And for the first time in years, that silence I hated started to sound like peace again. The surprise visit about a year after the court case, on a Saturday morning, someone buzzed my door. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened it, I nearly dropped my coffee. Kelly stood there, different this time, no makeup, hair tied up, wearing a thrift store denim jacket and holding a grocery bag. "Before you say anything," she said, "I'm not here for money." I didn't move, didn't speak. She looked like a ghost of the girl I raised, older, thinner, humbled somehow. "Can I just talk?" I hesitated, then stepped aside. Tom Brady hissed at her from the hallway. Even the cat had opinions. She sat at the table, hands shaking slightly. "Mom, I got a job, small place, in Clearwater. Just customer service for now, but I'm trying. I came to say, I'm sorry, not for what happened that night, I mean, yes, for that too, but for everything, for how I treated you, for thinking your love meant unlimited access to your life." I didn't interrupt, I just listened. Her voice broke. "You don't owe me anything. I just wanted you to know that." Silence filled the room again, but this time it wasn't heavy. I looked at her, really looked, and said, "Kelly, I don't hate you. I just can't go back to pretending none of it happened." She nodded, eyes glistening. "I know. I don't expect you to." Then she stood, grabbed her bag, and said, "Maybe one day you'll let me make it up to you." And just like that, she left. No hug, no dramatic music, just the sound of the elevator doors closing. I sat there for a long time afterward, staring at the cup she'd left on the table. Part of me wanted to cry, but instead I smiled. Not because everything was fixed, it wasn't, but because she finally said the words I'd waited a lifetime to hear. The lesson people think stories like mine are about revenge or karma. They're not. They're about self-respect, the kind you don't get taught growing up. For most of my life, I believed being a good mother meant sacrifice, that love was proven by what you could give up. Turns out, that belief almost cost me everything. It's weird, being 68 and learning something so basic. But I guess it's never too late to rewrite the rules. Now, when I talk to the younger nurses at the hospital, I tell them, don't wait until someone slaps you N-words or in deeds to set your boundaries. Start small. Protect your peace early. They always laugh, thinking I'm exaggerating. But one or two, the quiet ones, they nod. They get it. A new beginning. Last month, I sold the penthouse. Shocking, right? After all that. But it wasn't out of fear or pressure. I sold it because I wanted to on my terms. I found a cozy little place near the marina, single story, less to clean, more light. I donated half the furniture, gave the rest to charity. The realtor kept asking if I was sure. I told her, honey, I'm not losing a home. I'm gaining peace. Moving day was sunny, breezy. I stood on the balcony one last time, watching the gulls swoop low over the bay, and whispered, thank you. That apartment had seen my worst pain and my strongest comeback. Tom Brady meowed like he agreed. Now, every morning, I walk by the water with my coffee, watch the fishermen cast lines, and nod at the same old man who always yells, morning, nurse lady. Life's quiet again, but this time, quiet feels earned. Sometimes, I still get postcards from Kelly. She writes about work, therapy, a new boyfriend. I don't always reply, but I keep every single card in that same shoebox where I used to store letters from strangers. Feels like a full circle kind of thing. The message, if you've listened this far, you've already figured out this isn't just a story about a slap. It's about letting go of the version of love that hurts more than it heals. So here's my message to anyone who's been used, guilted, or broken by someone they love. You are not heartless for protecting yourself. You are not cruel for saying no. And you are not alone. Family is supposed to be your first home, not the first fire you have to put out. The night my daughter slapped me across the face, I thought my world had ended. Turns out, it was just the night my world started getting honest. Now, when people ask if I regret anything, I tell them this. I regret how long I waited to choose myself, And if you're sitting somewhere tonight, maybe with your own phone lighting up with messages that twist your gut, remember this old nurse's advice: don't answer out of guilt, don't explain yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you, and above all, don't mistake blood for love. Love is the people who respect your boundaries, even when they don't benefit from them. That's the family you keep, the rest, you let go. I'm 68, retired, got a cat named after a quarterback, and a peace I earned the hard way. If that's not a happy ending, I don't know what is. I used to think peace meant no more surprises. Turns out, peace just gives you space to notice the ones that still come. It was about 6 months after I sold the penthouse when life decided to throw me another curveball, not a bad one this time, just unexpected, like finding an old song on the radio that still knows all your sore spots. It showed up in my new mailbox one Friday afternoon. No return address, just my name written in blue ink that looked familiar in a way that made my stomach flutter. I carried it inside, set it on the counter, stared at it like it might hiss. Finally, I opened it. Inside was a short letter, 2 paragraphs, neat handwriting. Mom, I know you don't owe me a response. I just wanted to thank you. Losing everything was the best thing that ever happened to me. I've been sober 8 months now. I started going to church again. I don't want your money or your forgiveness. I just wanted to tell you I understand now what you were trying to teach me. Love, Kelly. Underneath the letter was a picture, her, standing in front of a tiny apartment building with a sign that read Oak Haven Recovery. She was smiling. Small, but real. I didn't cry right away. I sat there for a while, letter in one hand, cup of tea in the other, letting the quiet settle around me. Then I took a deep breath, looked up at the ceiling, and said out loud, "All right, God, I see what you're doing." A week later, I joined a local community group at St. Luke's, mostly retirees, who organize food drives and bake sales. I figured if Kelly could find healing in that place, maybe I could too. That's how I met Ruth and James, 2 old souls who adopted me like I was the new kid at school. Ruth was all energy and floral perfume, always pressing homemade cookies into your hands before you could say no. James was quiet, the kind of man who listens like it's a full-time job. One day after service, Ruth leaned over and said, "You're the nurse from that article, aren't you? The one with the daughter." I froze, halfway through my lemonade. She laughed softly. "Don't worry, honey. Half this town read it. You're stronger than most of us." Funny thing, I didn't feel exposed. I felt seen. That group became my anchor. We spent Thursday mornings packing groceries for low-income families, telling stories, arguing about recipes, teasing each other about who forgot the labels. Every now and then, Ruth would nudge me and whisper, "See, life's not done with you yet." And she was right. One afternoon, while I was sorting canned soup, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Normally I'd ignore it, but something made me step outside. "Hello, Mom." It was Kelly again. Her voice sounded steadier this time, healthier somehow. "I'm graduating from the program next month," she said. "They're giving out certificates and everything. I thought maybe you'd want to come." For a second I couldn't breathe. Part of me wanted to say yes right away. Another part whispered, "Be careful." So I said, "I'll think about it." And I did. 4 weeks. I talked to Dr. Campos, to Ruth, even to Tom Brady. He's a great listener, by the way. Every night I'd picture that moment in the ballroom, the slap, the silence after. Then I'd picture the girl in the photo, smiling in front of a rehab center, trying to rebuild from the rubble. Finally, I decided. The hall was small, just folding chairs and balloons, the smell of coffee and cheap perfume hanging in the air. A banner said, "One day at a time." I sat near the back, clutching a tissue, hoping nobody recognized me. When Kelly's name was called, she walked up in jeans and a white blouse, nothing fancy. But she stood tall, voice clear when she said, "I'm alive today because people stopped enabling me." I felt every word hit like little thuds in my chest. When she looked up, her eyes found mine. For a second, the whole room vanished. Just us, mother and daughter, both survivors of the same storm. After the ceremony, she walked over slowly. "You came," she said, barely above a whisper. I did. We stood there awkwardly, like 2 people trying to remember an old dance. Then she reached out and hugged me. Not a movie scene hug. A real one, hesitant, shaky, but solid. That's when I realized forgiveness isn't about erasing what happened. It's about deciding the past doesn't get to keep the keys anymore. After that day, we started small. Texts once a week, coffee on Sundays. We kept it surface level: weather, cats, new recipes, but it was something. I didn't bring up money, and she didn't ask. She started talking about volunteering at the same shelter that helped her. She even laughed about working part-time at a thrift store. Karma, she said. All those designer dresses I used to beg you for, now I'm selling them for $5. I laughed too. The kind that comes from somewhere deep, somewhere healed. One afternoon she brought over an old photo album she found in storage. Pictures from birthdays, beach trips, that one Christmas when Frank burned the turkey. We sat on my couch flipping through them, laughing till tears rolled down our cheeks. And then she said, softly, I miss Dad. I think about him every day. I nodded. He'd be proud of you, you know. She smiled. You think so? I know so. That moment, simple, quiet, was worth more than every apology she could ever give. Recovery isn't a straight line. I learned that the hard way. About 8 months later, Kelly disappeared again. Calls went unanswered. Texts left unread. My gut twisted into knots. I called Oakhaven. They said she hadn't checked in for 2 days. I drove there without thinking, heart pounding the whole way. When I pulled up, she was sitting outside on the curb, crying, hands shaking. I messed up, Mom, she said. I didn't drink, but I wanted to. I almost did. I sat beside her, wrapped my arm around her shoulders. Almost doesn't count as failure, I said. It counts as learning. She sobbed into my shoulder like she was 8 again, like time had folded in on itself. We sat there for a long time just breathing, cars passing, the Florida sun beating down. I realized then that forgiveness isn't one moment. It's a muscle. You've got to keep working it, or it goes weak again. Out of nowhere, a local journalist reached out, said they were making a short documentary about financial abuse in families. They wanted me to share my story. My first instinct was to say no. Why dig it up again? But then, I thought of all the letters from people who said hearing my story saved them from something similar. So I agreed. They filmed in my little living room, me on the couch. Tom Brady sprawled across the rug like he owned the place. I talked about boundaries, love, forgiveness, about how strength isn't loud, it's consistent. When the video went online, it blew up again. This time, though it wasn't pity or gossip, was empathy. Thousands of comments from people saying, thank you for saying what I couldn't. Kelly called after watching it. You were brave, she said. I'm proud of you. That one sentence undid me. The same daughter who once tried to take everything from me was now giving me the one thing she never had before, respect. A few months later, Oakhaven invited me to speak at their fundraiser dinner. They said my story had inspired half their clients. Standing at that podium, microphone trembling in my hand, I looked out at a sea of faces: recovering addicts, parents, counselors. I told them, healing isn't pretty. It's messy, inconvenient, and half the time it feels like it's going backward. But if you stick with it, one morning you'll wake up and realize the storm has been over for a while. You just forgot to stop bracing for it. People stood and clapped. Kelly cried in the front row. When I stepped down, she hugged me and whispered, you saved me twice, Mom. Once by loving me, and once by finally saying no. That night, I went home and sat at my desk, pulled out a fresh page, and wrote a letter to my late husband. Hey Frank, I wrote, our girl's trying. She fell hard, but she's learning how to stand again. You'd still recognize her, some stubborn streak. Same soft heart she hides under all that attitude. I think we're both going to be okay. I tucked the letter inside the same box that held his old wedding ring and the photos we never got around to framing. It felt like closing a chapter, not with bitterness, but with gratitude. These days, mornings start slow. I make coffee, open the curtains, let the light spill in. Kelly visits every other Sunday. She brings muffins from the bakery near her new apartment. We talk about simple things: weather, work, silly memes she found online. Sometimes she'll catch me looking at her a certain way and say, what? And I'll smile. Nothing. Just glad you're here. It's strange how peace sneaks up on you. You spend years chasing it, and then one day it's just sitting at your kitchen table, sipping coffee and laughing at cat videos. People ask me sometimes if I ever fully forgave Kelly. The honest answer: yes and no. Forgiveness, at least the kind that lasts, isn't a one and done event. It's a daily choice. Every time my mind drifts back to that ballroom, I remind myself she's not that person anymore. Every time I feel that phantom sting on my cheek, I take a deep breath and remember the hug at her graduation. Some days it's easy, some days it's work, but every day, it's worth it. Because forgiveness isn't about them. It's about freeing yourself from the version of you that got stuck in the hurt. Last Christmas, Kelly surprised me. She showed up with a small box wrapped in silver paper. Inside was a key change, just a cheap metal charm that said, "Home is earned, not given." I laughed. "That's kind of dark, don't you think?" She grinned. "It's also true. We spent the evening baking cookies, singing badly to carols, arguing about whose turn it was to wash the dishes. Ordinary stuff, the kind of night you don't realize is magic until it's over." As she left, she hugged me tight and whispered, "Thanks for not giving up on me." And I whispered back, "Thanks for finally showing up for yourself." When the door closed, I leaned against it for a minute, heart full in a way that didn't hurt anymore. The kind of full that feels like peace finally settling in for good. If you're still listening, maybe this whole story sounds heavy. But to me, it's not tragedy anymore, it's proof. Proof that people can break, rebuild, and still find something worth loving on the other side. I'm 70 now. My hands ache when it rains, my cat's gotten fat, and my daughter calls every week. Sometimes we talk about nothing at all, and that's the best part, because sometimes nothing means everything is finally okay. You'd think the story would end there, right? Daughter redeemed, mother healed, all neatly wrapped up like one of those made-for-TV movies. But real life doesn't roll credits that clean. It just keeps showing up, asking if you've really learned what you said you learned. After Kelly's recovery, something inside me shifted. I stopped thinking of myself as the woman who got slapped at her daughter's wedding. I started being Margaret Againner's neighbor, woman with a cat who snores louder than most men. Still, aging crept in like fog under a door. I'd wake up and my knees would protest the weather before the weatherman did. Some days I'd forget where I left my reading glasses, only to find them perched right on my head. But you know what? I stopped hiding those moments. I'd joke about them. Old age ain't a disease, I'd tell Ruth at church. It's just proof the warranty expired. The more honest I got about it, the freer I felt. There's this pressure on older women to stay quiet, neat, invisible, smile, soft, fade politely. Not me. I earned my wrinkles, they're the receipts of survival. So I started talking. At church groups, community centers, even a local college that invited me to speak about resilience. They called it a guest lecture. I called it free therapy with snacks. One talk stands out. It was at the community college downtown Big Hall. Harsh lights, maybe 100 students half awake behind their laptops. I stood at the podium with my note cards shaking in my hand. I told them about boundaries, about working nights as a nurse, while my husband's heart failed quietly at home. About my daughter's ambition that turned into greed. About the slap that made me see myself for the first time in decades. When I finished, the room was silent. Then a girl in the front row raised her hand. "My mom's like your daughter," she said. "She manipulates everyone around her. How did you forgive without letting her walk on you again?" I thought about that for a long second. "Forgiveness," I said, "isn't letting someone back in the door. It's taking your foot off the brake and moving forward, whether they catch up or not." The whole room nodded. That was the moment I realized my story wasn't just mine anymore. It was a roadmap for someone else crawling out of their own version of it. Afterward, one of the professors told me, "You should write a book." I laughed it off then, but the idea stayed. Over the next year, I did write, longhand, on yellow legal pads at first. I called it Bloodlines and Boundaries. Not some fancy memoir, just truths, one page at a time. I wrote about the early days with Frank, the long shifts, the grief, the wedding, the courtroom, the quiet mornings after. Each chapter ended the same way, with a note to my younger self. "Dear 25-year-old me, stop apologizing for existing. Dear 40-year-old me, stop rescuing people who refuse to swim. Dear 60-year-old me, you're finally free." When I finished, I didn't even think about publishing it. I just stacked the pages in a shoebox under my bed. But Ruth found out, of course she did, and marched it down to her cousin, who worked at a small local press. 6 months later, there it was, a real book with my name on the cover. When the first box of copies arrived, I sat on my floor, tearing the packaging open like a kid on Christmas morning. I held it, smelled the ink, and whispered, "Well, Frank, looks like we finally bought something that didn't depreciate." A few months after the book came out, Kelly called again. She'd read it. "Mom," she said, voice trembling, "I saw myself on every page and I hated it. But I also understood it. I didn't know how bad I'd gotten until I saw it written down. We met for dinner at a little diner halfway between our places. She looked good, healthier, cheeks fuller, eyes clear. I started therapy again, she said, and I've been volunteering at Oak Haven full-time. I smiled. You're turning your mess into medicine. That's good. Then she did something that stunned me. She reached into her purse and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. I know it's early, but I want to show you something. It was a business plan, simple, handwritten, the Phoenix Project, a small nonprofit to help women over 50 rebuild after financial abuse or family betrayal. You inspired it, she said quietly. You built yourself back up when I tried to tear you down. I want to help other women do that too. I couldn't even speak for a second, just reached across the table, squeezed her hand, and said, then let's make it happen. Starting a nonprofit in your 70s isn't exactly on most people's bucket lists, but we did it anyway. Kelly handled the logistics, permits, funding, connections. I handled the counseling side, talking to survivors, setting up support groups. Our first meeting had 7 women. Second week, 12. By month 3, we had over 50. Some came crying, some came angry. All of them came needing a place that didn't judge them for loving the wrong people too long. We rented a small office with donated furniture and a coffee maker that sounded like it was dying every morning. On the wall, we hung a sign, Rise Anyway. Every Thursday, I'd sit in that room and watch women tell their stories. Some soft, some ran, see that spark come back in their eyes. That tiny flicker that says, maybe I can start over too. Kelly would watch from the doorway sometimes, wiping her eyes quietly. One evening she said, Mom, you realize we're doing for others what you did for me, right? I smiled. That's the point, baby. That's how you pay life back. Word spread again. A local TV station ran a segment on the Phoenix Project. They filmed us handing out care packages, guiding workshops, laughing over donuts. For once, the cameras weren't capturing a scandal, they were capturing healing. When the segment aired, we got calls from all over the country. Donations, letters, even a few volunteers who'd read my book. One woman sent a message that said, I saw you two hugging on TV. I called my mom for the first time in 10 years. That one made me cry. Ugly cry. The kind that leaves your nose running and your heart light. Kelly framed that message and hung it by our office door. But no journey stays smooth forever. A year later, Kelly got sick. Not serious at first, just exhaustion, headaches, fatigue. Then tests showed liver issues, likely from her years of drinking and stress. When she told me, I felt that old panic rise again, the helpless kind that nurses hate most. She said, Mom, I'll be fine. I've got doctors. I'm not hiding it. And she didn't. She handled it like a warrior, kept working, kept smiling, even when chemo left her too tired to stand sometimes. I drove her to appointments, made soup, watched bad TV together. One night, she looked at me and whispered, You know, roles really reversed, huh? You used to take care of me because I couldn't stop destroying myself. Now, you're taking care of me because I'm trying to live. I brushed her hair back and said, It's still love, either way. Caring for her taught me something I missed my whole life. Letting someone help you can be as brave as helping others. When Kelly got stronger again, she insisted I take time off. Go travel, Mom. You've been carrying everyone forever. Go see something that isn't Tampa. So I did. I booked a senior tour to Oregon mountains, rivers, forests. First time I'd been on a plane in years. I met strangers who felt like friends within hours, laughed harder than I had in decades, took photos that actually looked like joy instead of proof of life. And one night, standing on a wooden bridge under a sky full of stars, I realized something wild. I wasn't waiting for the next tragedy anymore. I was living again. When I came back, Kelly had a surprise waiting. The Phoenix Project had grown. They'd partnered with another organization, built a small emergency housing program for older women in crisis. Guess what we named the first house? She said, smiling. I shrugged. The Langley home. My name, on a plaque. I laughed, half crying. You didn't have to do that, she said. I did, because you built the first home that saved me. I hugged her so hard that Tom Brady hissed from across the room, jealous as always. Not long after, a national talk show invited us. America loves a redemption story, the producer said. We almost didn't. GoTV made me nervous, but Kelly convinced me. So there we were, sitting under blinding lights again, this time side by side instead of at war. The host asked, If you could say one thing to the woman who slapped you that night, what would it be? I smiled. I'd say thank you. Because that slap woke us both up. Sometimes love has to shatter before it becomes real. Kelly squeezed my hand. The audience gasped softly, then clapped. Afterward, she looked at me backstage and said, "You really forgave me, didn't you?" I nodded. "A long time ago. I was just waiting for you to forgive yourself." These days, the Phoenix Project runs mostly without me. I still stop by to chat with new members, bring coffee, tell them the Wi-Fi password for the 100th time, but it's Kelly's show now, and watching her lead those sessions come patient. Strong, it feels like watching a circle close perfectly. I still write, too. My second book, After the Storm, came out last spring. Not as dramatic, more reflective stories of the women we met, the lessons we collected. Sometimes people ask if I miss the old life, the penthouse, the parties, the sense of being somebody. I tell them, I still am somebody. Just a better somebody. Last week, I sat on my porch watching the sunset burn orange over the bay. Kelly called, "Mom, guess what? I'm engaged." I laughed so loud my neighbor peeked over the fence. "You sure you want to try that again?" I teased. She laughed too. "He's different, Mom. Patient, kind, no hidden agenda. He even helped repaint the shelter last month." "Well," I said, "if he sticks around long enough to meet Tom Brady, we'll see." She snorted. "That cat hates everyone." We talked for an hour about love, fear, starting over. When we hung up, I sat there in the twilight, heart full again, not from pain this time, but gratitude. I thought about that night years ago, the music cutting off, the sting on my cheek, the whispers, and how far we'd come from that moment. From brokenness to rebuilding, from silence to strength. If I could talk to that woman standing under the chandeliers again, I'd tell her, "Hang on, Margie, one day, this wound will teach you everything you ever needed to know about love." And she'd probably roll her eyes and say, "Sure, easy for you to say you've seen the ending. But here's the secret, there's no ending, just chapters. And this one, it's the best one yet." You ever notice how life starts repeating itself, but softer, like an echo, not quite the same, but familiar enough to make you smile instead of flinch? That's what the next chapter felt like for me. Not a second chance, exactly, more like a slow remix of everything I'd already survived. When Kelly told me she was getting married again, my first reaction wasn't joy, it was quiet panic. The word wedding still made my stomach clench like a fist. Flashbacks to Chandelier's music cutting off mid-beat. The sound of that slap, it all came rushing back like bad déjà vu. But this time, she didn't come at me with demands or drama. She said, "Mom, I want to keep it simple. Just family, close friends, and no speeches unless you want to say something." I didn't answer right away. She noticed, smiled softly, and added, "It's not a redo of the past, it's something new." Her fiancé's name was Ethan, a quiet man with kind eyes, a teacher at a local high school, the kind who listens before he talks. When I met him, he stood, shook my hand, and said, "It's an honor to finally meet the woman who raised my favorite person." That one line disarmed me completely. They planned a small outdoor ceremony by the marina, just 30 guests, folding chairs, sunlight glinting off the water. No ballroom, no grand stage, just laughter and real smiles. When Kelly walked down the aisle this time, she didn't look like a bride out to prove something. She looked like herself, finally at peace. And when she reached me, she leaned in and whispered, "Thank you for coming. I wouldn't be here without you." I felt tears sting the corners of my eyes, but they weren't from pain, they were from pride. After the ceremony, someone handed me a microphone for toasts. My first instinct was to refuse, too many memories tied to that piece of metal, but the crowd cheered gently, encouraging me. I looked at Kelly and Ethan, standing hand in hand, sunlight painting them gold. Then I said, "Years ago, I stood at a different wedding with a broken heart. Tonight, I stand at this one with a healed one." Life doesn't give do-overs, but it gives grace when we least expect it. So here's 2 second chances that don't erase the past, they just rewrite the ending. The crowd clapped. Kelly cried. Ethan hugged me. And for the first time, a wedding ended with laughter instead of silence. Later that night, when the music slowed, Kelly and I danced together. Just us. No tension, no cameras, just 2 women swaying under fairy lights, forgiving the world one song at a time. After the wedding, the Phoenix Project took off faster than we could keep up. We were on local news again, then podcasts, then national TV. Grants came in from organizations that had once turned us away. We started new programs, financial literacy classes for older women, therapy partnerships, even a hotline. It wasn't just a charity anymore, it was a movement. And every week, Kelly and I would walk into our little office, sit down with coffee, and plan. It became our ritual, our version of church. One day she said, "You know, Mom, when I was younger, I thought power was about control. Now, I think it's about connection." I smiled. "Took you long enough to figure that out?" She rolled her eyes, laughing. "Guess I had a good teacher." A year later, we got invited to speak at a women's leadership conference in Chicago. Big event, 500 attendees, all professionals, activists, survivors. Kelly was nervous as hell. "I don't belong here," she said backstage, pacing. "They're all CEOs and lawyers." I took her hand. "You belong more than most. You lived the story there, just starting to talk about." When it was her turn, she walked on stage and froze for half a second. Then she said, "My name is Kelly Langley, and I used to be the villain in my own mother's story." Then she talked about addiction, greed, shame, redemption, about watching her mother rebuild from the wreckage she caused, about learning that forgiveness is a verb, not a feeling. By the time she finished, people were crying, clapping, hugging strangers. When she came off stage, I hugged her tight and whispered, "You just changed lives, baby." She whispered back, "You changed mine first." A month later, I got an unexpected delivery. A lawyer's envelope for a heartbeat. Old anxiety flared, but this wasn't bad news. It was from a woman named Diane. Her letter said, "Margaret, you don't know me, but my mother was in your first Phoenix group. She passed last year, before she died. She made me promise to send you this." Inside was a note from that mother, handwritten, "Because of you, I left my abusive husband and found peace in my last years. You don't know it, but you saved me." I folded that letter and placed it next to the one Kelly sent from rehab years ago. Two sides of the same miracle. A film crew reached out, next Netflix. This time, not local news. They wanted to make a full documentary called Boundaries, the Langley story. Kelly laughed when she read the proposal. "You realize the internet's about to know we're both stubborn as hell, right?" I grinned. "They'll figure that out in the first 5 minutes." Filming took months. Cameras followed us through meetings, speeches, our home lives. They even recreated scenes from the original wedding night tastefully. Thankfully, when the documentary premiered, people cried, wrote letters, started fundraisers. A reviewer called it a raw, unfiltered lesson in generational healing. Kelly and I watched it together, holding hands through the painful parts. When the credits rolled, she turned to me and said, "You know, Mom, this time the cameras didn't break us, they honored us." And she was right. Time kept moving, like it does. I turned 72. My hair went from silver to white, and Tom Brady started ignoring toys in favor of long naps on my lap. I'd wake up each morning grateful that I still could. I'd water my plants, call Kelly, check on the foundation. Every so often, I did get messages from people saying they watched the documentary and finally called their parents or cut ties with a toxic one and thanked us for helping them find courage. One message said, "I learned from you that love without respect isn't love at all." I printed that one and taped it to my fridge, because that was the truth, plain and simple. 2 years later, Kelly called with that tremble in her voice again. Only this time, it wasn't bad news. "Mom, I'm pregnant." I went quiet for a second, then laughed until I had to sit down. "Well, about time you give me a grandbaby. I was starting to think you'd adopt another cat instead." She laughed too, happy tears this time. "Ethan and I wanted to wait until we were really ready." "Sweetheart," I said, "being ready is a myth. You just love as best you can and learn the rest on the fly." The months that followed were pure joy. Ultrasound pictures on the fridge, baby name debates, Kelly glowing like she'd swallowed the sun. When little Grace was born, they handed her to me first. I looked down at her tiny face, same nose as Kelly, same little poutant, whispered, "Welcome to the world, baby girl. You come from strong women, even if it took us a while to figure out how to be." Kelly rested her head on my shoulder, whispering, "I want to do this right, Mom." And I said, "You already are. Raising a grandchild is different. You don't worry the same way, you marvel more. You notice every little thing because you know how fast it goes." I'd rock Grace on the porch, tell her stories about her grandpa Frank, about bravery and mistakes and forgiveness. Sometimes Kelly would sit with us, listening quietly, smiling. One evening she said, "I want Grace to know everything good and bad. I don't want to hide who we were." I nodded. Truth builds stronger families than secrets ever will. Now, as I sit here writing this, Grace is 5. She calls me Nana Grit because she couldn't say Grandma Margaret when she was little, and honestly, I like her version better. Kelly and Ethan's foundation is thriving across 3 states. I'm semi-retired, though they still drag me to panels now and then. And sometimes, when the sun sets over the bay, I take my old photo album out, the one with the pictures of Frank, of Kelly as a baby, of that infamous wedding day. I don't cry anymore when I see them. I just smile, because those pictures don't tell a sad story. They tell a real one. A story about falling apart, learning boundaries, finding love again when you least expect it. If you'd told me years ago that the same daughter who once humiliated me would one day become my best friend and business partner, I'd have laughed you right out of the room. But life's funny like that. It keeps rewriting its own endings. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Healing doesn't erase the past, it gives it purpose. So here I am, 75 years old, sipping coffee in my worn armchair, cat snoring beside me, grandkid toys scattered across the floor, heart so full it almost hurts. And for the first time, I can honestly say I'm glad it all happened exactly the way it did, because it brought me here. Time has this strange way of sneaking past you when things finally stop hurting. One day, you wake up and realize you've been peaceful for so long that chaos feels like a distant language. That's where I was. Grace turned 6 that summer. She had her mother's smile, her father's calm, and my stubborn streak, God help her. She'd run through my garden barefoot, curls bouncing, yelling, "Nana Grit, watch me jump." And I'd laugh every single time like it was the first. Sometimes, when I watched her play, I'd see little flashes of Kelly at that age before the world got too loud, before the pressure and pride and ambition took hold. It used to make me sad. Now it just made me thankful we'd found our way back. The past had become a story I could tell without crying. That's when you know you're free. My second book, After the Storm, started selling better than anyone expected. Apparently, people liked hearing from an old woman who didn't sugarcoat anything. My publisher wanted me to do a small tour: Florida, Georgia, the Carolinas. I said no at first. I'd done enough public healing, but Kelly insisted. "Mom, people need to hear you. In person." So, I agreed to a few stops. At the first event, a woman about my age stood up, tears in her eyes. "My daughter and I haven't spoken in 10 years, she said. "Your story made me write her a letter." She wrote back. I walked around the podium and hugged her. "Then, that's your happy ending," I whispered. Moments like that made every painful memory worth it. By the last city on the tour, Kelly and Grace were traveling with me. Grace would hand out bookmarks like they were golden tickets, telling people, "My Nana's famous." I'd laugh, blush, and whisper, "I'm just loud, sweetheart. There's a difference." Around that same time, my health started wobbling. Nothing dramatic at first, just shortness of breath, fatigue, a few dizzy spells. I brushed it off, told Kelly not to fuss. But mothers forget that daughters learn by example. She dragged me to the doctor, who ordered scans just to be safe. A week later, he used that word nobody ever wants to hear: cancer, stage 2, lung cancer. Slow growing, treatable, but still cancer. I remember sitting there, nodding like it was a weather forecast instead of a diagnosis. Kelly broke down first. "This isn't fair," she said, clutching my hand. I smiled gently. "Fair's got nothing to do with life, sweetheart. We just do what we can with what we've got." I started treatment a month later. Chemo, radiation, the whole exhausting dance. Kelly and Ethan took turns staying with me. Grace would color pictures for me every day: rainbows, flowers, stick figures holding hands under big smiling suns. She'd tape them to my bedroom wall until there was no space left. On the worst days, I'd look at those drawings and remind myself why I was fighting. Not for more years, just for more moments. One afternoon, when my hair had started thinning, Grace climbed into bed beside me with that serious look only children can pull off. "Nana," she said softly, "are you gonna die?" I swallowed hard. "Someday, sure, but not today." She nodded, thought for a while, then asked, "Are you scared?" I smiled. "A little. But I've been through worse storms, sweetheart." She tilted her head. "Mommy said you're brave. She said you teach people to be brave." "Well," I said, brushing a curl from her face. Then, I guess I better keep teaching. That night, when Kelly came to tuck her in, Grace whispered, "Mommy, when I grow up, I want to be brave, like Nana Grit." I heard it from the hallway. That one sentence healed something deep in me I didn't even know was still cracked. While I went through treatment, the Phoenix Project kept running like a heartbeat. Kelly had turned into a force of nature. She spoke at conferences, met with lawmakers, expanded our programs nationally. One day she brought home a new proposal. "Mom, we want to open a center just for older women who lost everything: homes, savings, family. A place they can start over with dignity. We're naming it the Grit Center." I laughed through tears. "You're gonna make me cry in my own kitchen." She squeezed my hand. "It's because of you, Mom. You showed me that rebuilding isn't just possible, it's necessary." Construction started 6 months later. I didn't have the strength to help much, but I'd visit the site whenever I could, watching walls go up like chapters being written in brick and glass. When it opened, Kelly wheeled me to the ribbon-cutting ceremony. My hands shook too much to hold the scissors, so Grace put her tiny fingers over mine and helped me cut the ribbon together. Cameras flashed, people clapped, and I whispered, "You see that, Frank? Your girls did it." Chemo wore me down over time. Some days, I felt like a leaf in a strong wind. But I wasn't scared. I'd already lived 3 lives worth of lessons: wife, mother, survivor, teacher. Kelly tried to hide her worry behind to-do lists and schedules. I'd catch her staring at me when she thought I wasn't looking. One evening, I said, "Sweetheart, I'm not afraid to go." She shook her head, tears welling. "I'm not ready to lose you." I smiled. "You don't lose people you carry in your heart. They just change rooms." She laughed through her tears. "You always know what to say. Perks of being old," I said, grinning. From then on, we stopped talking about dying and started talking about living. We made lists, places to visit, recipes to try, people to thank. I told her all the stories I'd never gotten around to. And every time Grace burst into the room with that endless energy, I'd think, there's my legacy. Not the penthouse, not the books, not the headlines. Her, the proof that love can heal generations. One morning, I sat at my desk, sunlight spilling over the papers, and wrote a letter for Grace to open when she turned 18. It said, "Dear Grace, if you're reading this, I've probably gone off to annoy your grandpa in heaven. Don't be sad. I got to live more than most people ever dream of. You come from women who learned the hard way that strength isn't loud, it's steady. Remember that. Never let anyone make you feel guilty for protecting your peace. Help people, but never at the cost of losing yourself. And when life hits you hard, take a breath and say, I'll rise anyway." That's what we do, baby girl. We rise. I sealed it, wrote "Open at 18" on the envelope, and tucked it inside a box labeled for Grace, from Nana Grit. The day it happened was quiet. No drama, no pain, just soft morning light, the sound of seagulls, and the faint purr of my old cat curled beside me. Kelly was in the kitchen making coffee. I called out, "Make it strong, I'm gonna need it." She laughed from down the hall. "You and your caffeine addiction, Mom." A few minutes later, she came in and found me smiling, head tilted toward the window, eyes closed, that same peace on my face that I'd been chasing my whole life. That's how I went mid-laughter, mid-light, mid-laugh. Kelly told me later, told the world, really, that she didn't cry at first. She just sat on the floor, holding my hand, whispering, "Thank you, Mom, for everything." Then she picked up my notebook, the one I'd been writing in till the end, and found the last words I'd written. Every life has a turning point. Mine just happened to come with a slap that turned into salvation. They used that line at my memorial. Ruth spoke, James sang, and Kelly stood up and said, "My mother wasn't just my hero, she was my reset button." Grace, only 6 then, climbed up on stage, looked out at the crowd, and said, "My Nana Grit told me to rise anyway." The whole room stood up and clapped. Some cried, some laughed, but everyone understood. Years passed. Kelly ran the Phoenix Project and the Grit Center like empires built on kindness. Grace grew up fearless. She'd visit the shelter, hand out lunches, tell women, "My Nana built this place." And in every hallway of that building, there's a quote painted in gold letters across the wall. "Love doesn't mean surrender. Boundaries aren't betrayal." That was mine. Kelly said it belonged there forever. One day, Grace found the letter I left her. She was 18 now, taller than her mom, same fire in her eyes. She read it, smiled, and whispered, "I'll rise anyway." And she did. 10 years after my passing, Kelly hosted a reunion event at the Grit Center. Survivors, volunteers, donors all there. She stood at the podium, looked up at my picture, and said, "People always ask if I regret what happened that night at my first wedding. I don't, because that moment, the ugliest one of my life, became the seed of everything beautiful that followed. My mother taught me that pain doesn't define us. What we do with it does." Then she paused, smiled, and said, she used to say, "Sometimes love has to break you before it saves you." And she was right. The crowd stood and clapped for a long time. Kelly cried, but this time, her tears were pure gratitude. And somewhere, wherever souls go when they're done here, I like to think I smiled, too. Because endings are overrated. All stories are just continuations of other stories. Kelly keeps writing. Grace keeps growing. The women we helped keep helping others. And every time someone stands up for themselves, sets a boundary, or says no to something toxic, a tiny part of me keeps living in that moment. That's the kind of immortality that matters. So if you're listening right now, maybe you've been hurt, maybe you've been betrayed, maybe you're tired of giving too much. Remember this: you're not broken, you're rebuilding, and your next chapter can be the best one yet. If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell, because we've got more real stories of strength, healing, and redemption coming your way. Drop a comment below. Tell us what part hit home for you the most. Was it the mother who learned to let go, the daughter who found redemption, or the granddaughter who carried their legacy forward? And if you've ever had to rebuild after life knocked you down, type "ILL rise" anyway in the comments so we know you're part of this family of survivors too. You're not alone here. Every scar, every setback, every second chance, it all means something. So until the next story, take care of your heart, protect your peace, and remember, love doesn't mean surrender.